How many times have you visited a farm or heard a story of a farmer or landowner that wished they had more people on the farm? Someone to start a market garden, someone to run a chicken operation or an advanced biofertiliser brewery. More stacked enterprises, more diversity, and more hands and eyes on the farm. Of course, only if it makes financial sense, but let's assume that's the case. Where do you find these entrepreneurial people who fit your context, your farm, your country, your culture, and your personality? And when you find them, how do you structure the financial legal side to make a partnership that actually lasts? We probably all agree we need more people, well-paid people on the land. So how do we make that happen? This is a conversation where we walk the land, albeit only 2 hectares, and check in on the latest developments around pasture-based chickens on the land of Fred, and the earliest starts of an agroforestry system, but more importantly, on the new venture of Fred, focused on land matching between people owning the land and people able to work the land, but they don't have access to it, facilitating land partnerships which should last. This is the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast, where we learn more on how to put money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities, and ecosystems, while making an appropriate and fair return. So welcome to, I have the feeling I keep saying this last month, to another special episode. So I will say, if everything is special, nothing is special, obviously. To another episode. We have Fred back on the show, and it is a different one, at least, as we're walking land, a couple of hectares. We're close to the chickens. We're actually bare feet, of course, we had to, because it's a really nice day here in the Danish countryside. And I think it was about a year plus we had you on.
Yes.
After a massive tour through Europe, I think 12 different farms you visited and worked on, not just visited, but actually spent quality time on the land and in their books. So we're going to talk about that as well. And that was exactly the moment you were landing back in Denmark, figuring out what to do, and a lot has happened since then. So, of course, I'll put the link in of the other episode we did previously in the show notes. If you haven't listened to that, don't do it now. Do it another moment. But you might want to take a stroll, or you might want to cook something, or you might want whatever you end up doing. And tell me as well what do you do when you listen to the podcast? It's always nice to hear those. But welcome back, Fred, and thank you for having us on your beautiful piece of land, walking through a very diverse pasture.
You're more than welcome. At least it's a bit more diverse than the neighboring fields, I would say. Which, of course...
Although there are, it's funny because you see the very monoculture, and there's some very stubborn plants poking through, which there always are, of course. But yeah, so just to describe a bit, always the walking the land episodes we try to make them as visual as possible, even though they're audio, obviously. Like, where are we just geography-wise, and what should people imagine if they would be walking here with us, what they see around?
Well, first of all, we are right around an hour southwest of Copenhagen. It's just outside a town called Næstved. Specifically, this place is called Korshøjgårdsvej, which is a mouthful.
Try to Google that, yeah. Only Danish people can Google that, probably.
Even some Danish people find that difficult. There's the entire land plot is actually 3.3 hectares, so that includes some houses, 2 houses. There's a bit of a perennial market garden, a little bit, mostly hobby, that one. And then we planted quite a few cherry trees, which is an alleyway in the middle that we haven't got to yet. And then we have the pawpaw trees that are struggling a little bit for the first year here. But then on top of that, we have the chicken, or the hens, really, as they are. And so there's essentially a small, tiny flock trying to figure out if we want to do a dual purpose kind of operation in Denmark. What would that look like? What is what's the sales, what's the price we should and can take for that, and what is the optimal way of doing it, and what kind of feed is really great, and how often should we move them, how does the grass respond? There's tons of questions, of course.
And they just arrived, like this is 2 months in, right?
Yeah.
They're 19, they were 20, and so that's predator issues, like how serious is that, and how do you, because it's interesting immediately, and that was also definitely a theme of the other conversation we had, the previous one. You go into, okay, how does this look like economically and time-wise? And how does this look moving-wise, an hour and minutes? And okay, does this make sense? Like, of course, 19 is not a sustainable number, but it gives you data. It gives you data on feed and how much insect versus grain and all of those things that, like,
Sure.
those models aren't really there. Those recipes, I think, on the, like, if you would be wanting to do that in the Danish countryside or many other places, nobody is able to tell you.
No.
Like, what, okay, do you need 1,000 chickens or 10,000 or 500? Or what do you need to build? What kind of grass do you need? How do you optimize for, because those recipes, quote unquote, are basically non-existent. So this is research you're doing, basically. Yeah.
Definitely. And a lot of these assumptions that you're mentioning, or alluding to at least, they are unverified still. And even in this context, we're still getting started. And from my current assumptions, I start to be able to make a nice living from it at around 600 hens. It's a bit of a step.
Yeah, but not
Not
completely
not massive amount, of
No.
course, of hens relative to what is the standard many other places, but that allows me to hire someone, pay them well, and I would need to convince my neighbor to use a little bit of his land, which I think I can, hopefully. I'm lobbying to it. So later today, serving some cake to convince
coffee
him.
and then
No, but it's so that's on the current
How much
assumptions.
land would you need for that?
Around a hectare more.
Okay.
Which is essentially this plot right next to, conveniently enough. So that should be enough.
Of course, not growing all the feed yourself. Like there's
No. No, I couldn't do that here for sure. But one of the assumptions was that we can avoid a massive amount of feed if we're just letting them stroll around and find their own food. And the fact that we have we have a close vicinity to like a bit of a wildlife reserve here. So that's a lot of insects really that's coming our way, despite the fact that we're surrounded by a lot of monoculture. We're still finding a lot of insects here, and thus the hens are also finding that, which is great. So in those 2 months that we've had them, we were counting on, let's say, around 75, 76 kilos of feed for these hens per month. And so far, we've only, after 2 months, we spent 50.
Which is a third, which shows like, what was the number based on, the 75?
Some industry reports and asking other people around here. So it may have been a bit high and we planned it relatively conservatively, but those were the numbers that I could find. And again, it just proves that assumptions are just assumptions, and we're gonna have the proof is in the pudding, really. So
it's such a big difference.
It is, and also we have to also take into regard that these are new hens.
Yeah.
So the feed consumption will probably pick up.
Yeah.
So
they are dual purpose, relatively focused. You mentioned before, which we've covered deeply.
Two of them are
with Claire. We'll link that below as well if you want to know more.
Definitely inspired by Plantain for that, 100%.
Plantain Farm UK. Shout out to Anne. And Claire.
Annie and Claire. Hello, and George and Rupert, of course. Yeah. So 2 of the breeds are like what you would probably call strictly or dual purpose breeds that are purposefully bred for that. So it's Plymouth Rock and it's Light Sussex, they call it here. But they're essentially meaty hens, right? And so they work well for both. Of course, it's not like a hybrid hen that lays 365 eggs per year, but it's not that far off. And you're gonna get 320, 300, something like that, depending on how the welfare and all kinds of other factors. And then they actually work well for slaughtering as well. So we can take time off in the wintertime. But that's kind of part of our context here is really, we would like to have the option at least to not have to take care of 600 or 1,200, whatever, hens throughout the winter. So yeah, it's part of
which is interesting, from a puzzle perspective, how also the land perspective, of course, then you need to, the logistics, you need to house them somewhere.
Yeah.
You cannot have them outside to a certain extent. Like the logistical challenge becomes just much easier to put them inside, which of course is where the whole industry went to.
Yeah.
Instead of having that role on the land, which they do, that here they take way more insects and other sources than you planned for, you thought, or you modeled.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware that a lot of these breeds are obviously somewhat accustomed to the Danish climate over time, but they still suffer a bit in the cold, and they definitely up their feed consumption, and the egg production is way down in winter. So it's from an economic perspective, the general idea is that they're not efficient egg layers in the wintertime anyway. And we think we can get a good price for them if we sell them as meat. So that
Then it
remains
makes
to be
sense.
seen as well. But but in all of these things, and in all honesty, it's like we're thinking that we really want to, first of all, test how much do we really want to take care of hens?
Because
There's also other things, and there's a bit of a dead animal here.
not a hen, but something that wants to take.
Take the roots. Yeah,
the roots
I
of your
forget the
trees.
name of it, but
Or something.
it's like it looks like a big rat, really.
Yeah.
More furry. Anyway, so visually speaking, we're walking next to the cherry trees. We planted 70 cherry trees, which we're gonna try and make some beverages from, unless my girlfriend eats all of them.
Beforehand,
She's Persian, so she loves the sour cherries, really. And so,
And do you see have you rotated? It's 2 months, but like the impact of the chickens on the land?
yeah. Well, you can see it. The place we started. Well, now you can't see it, but you probably didn't notice any difference right next to the shed over there, where
The future brooder,
the future brooder, because the difference is very minimal because the land has been responding insanely well. So we thought that we were not going to be able to put chickens back there until after, I don't know, 3 months or something like that. But after 1 month, the grass was essentially ready. Well, a bit more than a month. Let's say 5 weeks. It was basically ready for. So we also, to be fair, we didn't push the grass that hard in that spot. And we tried to push the grass a bit harder down here just to see what will happen. But
is there like any thought on integrating other animals on the ruminant side? We often do, but of course then the winter comes as well. Integrating ruminants and chickens in a nice insect orchestra.
Yeah, I think we're just too small for that, to be honest. Our plot doesn't really lend itself very well for that. But I think we're probably, due to the slug, a classic slug issue in the perennial market garden there.
You're going to go for ducks.
We're looking for ducks. Yes, you might imagine, as we're walking past the struggling pawpaw trees.
Last year was an absolute slug disaster in most of Northern Europe.
Yeah.
And this year looks better, I think. Like it's less.
Well, if you ask my mom, who's just walking over there, she'll curse them for sure.
No, last year we were in a market garden last spring, like probably this Andres Yara, and the amount in the thousands per day, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And then and of course everybody suddenly was like this whole explosion. Everybody was looking for runner ducks to get them. There was a whole business around runner ducks for hire, basically. But we were, I think, at Benedict Beusel's there, the market garden. They also had a massive issue, and they couldn't get them in because they're fully vegan, so they didn't want animals on the land.
Okay.
But they just kept removing them, and it was just an endless, because they were all set up for drought. And then I think last year was very wet. So they were used to very dry circumstances. Suddenly it became super wet, and the market garden just was ambushed by.
I can imagine.
And
wow, that's an interesting topic, by the way.
Regenerative,
how does that kind of work in practice? I'm a bit puzzled, to be honest. But
I think there are market gardens around, especially on the.
Oh yeah, market gardens.
You need to be really good, obviously, with compost, but then if you have a slug problem, are you hardcore enough to not get the slugs or not get the ducks for the slugs?
For the slugs, yeah.
And that's a question. I don't know if I would be that radical.
But also,
my carrots being devoured.
Yeah, and also, what's the actual issue? Let's say you're vegan.
Yeah, we're getting ducks to do the work. Yeah, I mean,
they're going to be happy to do it, and you're just caring for animals then. Hello, doggies.
The guard dogs are around. And so here, figuring out recipes, what could work. What's been the reaction from the surrounding in that sense?
Very receptive. Hello. Yeah, everyone just wants the eggs. We are just an undersupply. Which I think is regulated. It's such a pattern that I'm seeing with everyone who's.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think that people.
Such an access to quality, relatively okay price, easy. You see the difference when you buy. What makes eggs such a low-hanging fruit, or I don't know, gateway drug, or whatever term you want to use? Because you hear it everywhere, and for crazy prices. You can push it up to, I think, €1, more than €1 per egg in certain
Yeah,
Your happy
I've seen
chicken
that.
situations.
I've seen. In Copenhagen, I've seen a sales price of more than €1, which I think, to be honest, I
I'm not
don't
supporting
feel.
that, but
I don't feel comfortable going that high. To be honest,
or
it's
are
not
there like
really.
the sport people that are really looking for this?
Yeah.
Like, what's that we suddenly care about quality of eggs and where they came from in the chickens compared to any other protein that we don't really care about yet?
Well, I think it's quite tangible. You can go and see it, and
Sure.
a lot of people, a lot more people have had chickens in the backyard compared to a cow in the backyard.
Very true.
So I feel like it's probably
or know
more
someone
relatable. They know
as
someone.
a child. You had
They've held a chicken, or they've been traumatized by being in a kindergarten where they chopped off the head of a hen, and then it was running around, and then now they're traumatized for life, and they're scared, and then they just want someone else to do it. I don't know, but you get the point.
I'm not sure about like Danish kindergarten, but
It's happened. I'm just telling you.
of course it happened.
I've got a cousin
And
who's was afraid of chickens, and now he won't come here because of that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah. No, I can, but it's much more relatable because it is smaller and people that have them.
Yeah, it feels more, and also like I feel like the quality difference is probably easier to detect. Like the freshness and that. I always talk about this experience when the first time I tasted these pasture-raised eggs really at Planton, and I usually would put salt on my eggs, and I just didn't have to. And it was just a kind of mind-blowing for me, and I feel like it's the same with our eggs here. That it's just
like a
very
superfood and relatively accessible. Like an amazing steak would push you down, like set you back quite a bit. And eggs, even if they cost 60, 70, 80 cents,
Yeah,
it's a very complete
definitely.
superfood. And yeah, no, but it's interesting how many of these places with amazing pasture raised eggs are constantly sold out, like you basically. Of course you have 19 chickens.
There's nothing, right?
But the reception and the fact that you even look at, okay, if I got to 500-600, I know I could make it work, and I can probably, that's like 500 eggs a day. That's not insignificant.
Yeah.
And you don't want to drive all the way to Copenhagen to sell that. Like you want to probably, or
well, I would think that I could sell them locally,
yeah,
given the response so far. But who knows? Maybe I'll
no.
find one sales outlet in Copenhagen or whatever.
Yeah.
It also is a matter of finding enough people really who want that. And whilst I do think that they probably are here, even I say quote unquote even in a place like Næstved, where I am now, I think they do exist. It's my sense so far. And also I think it's the fact that eggs are not just, if you have a steak, how much can you really do with it? You can eat it, you can grill it, maybe but with eggs, it's like it's an ingredient, it's a product in itself. So there's so many things you can really do with it. And so it's just, I feel like it's more accessible price-wise, it's more versatile. There are not a lot of people who are scared of eating it, meaning that, okay, some people at least would hesitate to eat a lot of, let's say, red meat for various reasons. And that's not the same with eggs. Eggs are just, everyone loves eggs. It's just
interesting, and it's a bit of a revival because we had that whole cholesterol scare, but that somehow seems less now. I think a lot of research is not backing up the fact that we should really be scared.
Yeah,
I still remember Pierre Wheel of Bleu Blanco who came on the show and said, really well-raised eggs or chickens that lay eggs can be super healthy, or if it's raised on soy, etc., it can be very inflammatory. Like it is that kind of product that can go both ways, like many animal proteins. So you can see it very quickly of what you fed it, it's going to show up. And people start to recognize them. Very interesting. And then
totally. Yeah.
This is not most of your, let's say, week. Of course, you move the chickens, and of course, you collect the 10 eggs, etc. But that's not, and you do some of the analysis. Okay, do I actually want to do this, etc.
Yeah.
But you do a lot of financial planning and work with clients all over Europe, and that morphed into, or is about to, or starts to morph into a company. So not quote unquote just, because it's not just, say, freelance work for a farmer in Spain that wants to understand his or her financial situation, or like what we discussed last time, dashboarding and things like that. No, it's becoming a company.
Yeah, it is.
And how did that happen? How did it come about?
Well, it's like a good love story, right? I met someone. No, I started working, of course, it's actually mostly in the UK for farm clients, really. And I met my now business partner Harry Epsom, who's a land agent, and he's been dubbed the regenerative land agent of the UK somehow. Not a self-taken title, but a
Okay,
given,
given
luckily.
one, which is very important.
He's
Yeah.
very humble in his ways. So, yeah, we met, and it turns out that we started having common clients, really, and working more and more together. And we saw the same issues, really, of people wanting to find people to work with, and they couldn't find let's say, good people to work with, really. So we thought, okay, if we're seeing this pattern pretty clearly, could we help solve that? And so we looked at the existing ways of doing that. You have the concept of land matching, really, which is not unknown and not unheard of, but it would appear that it didn't really, the current attempts had not solved the problem in its entirety. I think they solved pockets of it. Like, it's often been very regionally focused. It's often been very manual, which has its value, of course, but doesn't make it very scalable and therefore not economical.
What's the current solution? Let's say, what's the current problem and the current solution? It's a farmer looking, or a landowner looking, a contractor, someone to farm the land for a bit and hopefully pay rent, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a few different things that go wrong there, but mainly it comes down to good farms are run by good relationships. And so what we saw both in the literature, really, and by talking to people and understanding from our own experience, is that the main thing that goes wrong in these collaborations or partnerships, as they are, joint venture or contract farming or tenancy, really, as well, has a degree of sometimes of profit share, etc. It could be, is that is the relationship between the farmers, really, that go wrong. And why is that, right? So we started looking into that, and it turns out that there's currently no real in-depth alignment of expectations. There's no match between necessarily the holistic context, if you will, or the visions, and so there's just not a lot of matching happening in general. And I totally pay respect to all of the different people who've done land matching in the past, and they've done really amazing work. But it's also been relatively limited how many they could reach, really, because it's been fairly manual. And I'm saying that right now our process is
super manual.
Is more manual than we would like to. Of course, we've in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 months since we've really agreed that this is what we're doing. We've gathered a lot of processes and templates and standard ways of doing things and using different digital tools together to streamline the process. Okay, that's nice. And build, of course, a database of candidates, really, for landholders, which we call land seekers, essentially. But it's still a relatively manual process, right?
Matchmake, like a manual dating process for...
It's like Tinder for farms.
Yeah.
I'm not, well, I didn't say that. We should cut it out.
No, but but I think the issue is so large. Like, you have so many people, for some kind of reason, and we can do a whole series about land ownership issues, should it be concentrated, etc., etc. But let's say they have the land. And they're not gonna, for now, sell it into or give it to the commons. Some will, but let's say the majority, 80-20, won't. Probably. Being very generous. So what's going to happen there? Many are not willing, able, or interested in managing that land differently, which means most of the land is managed subpar, like the absolute basis to get maybe a subsidy, to pay the rent, or but not to its fullest ecosystem, or even financial, probably financial as well, potential. And then there's this whole group, but that's an assumption, of course, that there are people that are able to farm at a certain scale and able to communicate money and run it as a company, like a small company. We talked about that last time as well, and cooperate with others and do the value add, etc., and bring home an interesting salary. But they weren't lucky in the sperm lottery that they were born on land, and so there's that huge mismatch. But then, of course, the question: is it actually a scalable way of bringing them together and not help 5 or 10 per year, which is amazing, but it's not going to cut it. Let's say in this transition, because there's this generational shift as well. Like, can we start pre-selecting people already for all those farms that are going to be up for sale, up for transition, up for anything? Because what's the average age? 60 something?
65 something.
And that's an issue. And so you're stepping right in the middle of that tension. Okay, we have younger people that want to farm. Some are able. Okay, let's match. But then there's this really interesting. It's my land, so this, and are you happy if there's 70 cherry trees on your land and a chicken caravan? Maybe not, maybe yes.
there's so many things to just talk about from
Yeah.
what the things you just mentioned.
Yeah,
So
sorry, it was
the
a bit of a
question is
rant.
where to start. Let's say we take the perspective of the landholder, right?
That's that's
Farm owner, or we say landholder because they may be renting some of it or on different
but they can
lengths of
decide.
contracts and
They
so
can
on.
decide
They have the
who.
control of it,
Yeah,
really,
they have the control
at the
of
end of
it.
the day. So from their perspective, we're lucky, I would say, to work with some of the, I would say, pioneers in the UK as of now, who really want to move the needle and have access to a fairly big piece of land. So a lot can happen.
And when you say move the needle, are they interested themselves to farm and bring others on as well, like to start stacking these things, or is it like I want someone to take this out of my hands and just run with it, but I don't want to be moving the chicken tractors, or I don't want to be doing my whatever I was doing before?
Well, I guess a mixture of what you're saying, because
But when you say pioneers, are they still involved in that as well?
they're involved in the sense that they have a fairly clear vision, actually, that we, in some cases, help them refine as well. And they want to be involved in the direction of the farm, but they don't, like you're saying, want to move the chicken caravan because they are doing other things, and they're doing, essentially, you could almost look at them as like portfolio managers of an investment fund.
Interesting, yeah.
Where, okay, you have on the farm, you have a few stacked enterprises. You may have cows, and there's some follower chickens. You may have a market garden. And some people even have not directly farming related, but more like processing steps, like a butchery, like
So real estate,
abattoir,
and you can't imagine.
yeah, and like hospitality things. So like there's a whole range of things that are related to activities around food and farming that ideally regenerate the land, right? And mostly for now, we're focusing on the ones that are producing food. But we have examples of, let's say, finding someone who can tie it all together between the different enterprises and actually run a farm shop, right? That is an example.
That's also, but
happening.
it's so interesting from the conversation we had, and as well, like how we expect all of these functions to live in one person or two, maybe a couple, and it's like nowhere else in economy we expect that. It's like, no, you specialize and you start
That's it.
hiring people or finding people, joint ventures. Like, what are the structures that specialization makes sense? And of course, you want to do diverse things. I'm not saying you want to plant strawberries every day, but you. And so these are the pioneers that recognize, okay, there could be space for other people if I only had the time and attention for this. Or
That's it.
But actually, if I have somebody that does the farm shop properly, it's amazing. But it's
100%.
also a job, and then so somebody comes to you because you're not looking for. Are you? Maybe it's a question like for employees versus entrepreneurs. Is that a?
It's for now. It's been mainly looking for someone with at least a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, because you're essentially looking for a partner.
Yeah.
You're looking for a business partner, not an employee. But it also happens that, okay, this could be a big risk for both sides. Let's test it out. So we don't, of course, we can't decide things for the landholders nor the land seekers, really. We can recommend things and we can encourage. And so we do encourage testing it out, really, the relationship, and having a framework of leveling expectations and having conflict management.
What does success
look like, right? And let's make sure that we check in regularly. Let's make sure that there's at least a potential for a mediator to come in and help in the cases where it gets difficult, because it does get difficult and there's a lot of risk, and it's a lot of farming is just risk management, right? So that's another reason to not take everything on yourself is, well, maybe I should share the risk with someone who has their hands on the stove, really. With the right incentive, we are aligned in the vision sufficiently to work together, and we know how each person prefers to communicate and things like that. There's these things that are really important but often overlooked, where we work with an occupational therapist to help us on the psychology side. And at the end of the day, we hope that's going to help, and so far it looks good.
Yeah.
But we're only getting started. It could be an answer for many things, but we're hopeful.
And because so far you've been focusing on, or let's say the starting point is the landholder, because I can immediately imagine they are eager, obviously, to have, when well matched, extra help, support, entrepreneurial spirit, etc. on their land, because usually what we see, I think anywhere, on a, let's say, mid-sized farm or reasonable sized plot, we're only scratching the surface of how many enterprises, how many ecological enterprises, how like, holistically we can push the boundaries when it comes to agroforestry, when it comes to processing, when it comes to keeping money on theirs. We're very much at the beginning of many places, but they all require semi-full-time attention. So of course, not all gets done. Then from the other side, like on term of like the land seekers, how has been the response there? Because they are seeking, which means they have been talking to farm, like what's not in it for them, but how is this helping them to find better places to start and trial faster?
Well, I guess the basic principle is that we help them find it, right? And so
And they've been looking probably, yeah.
They've been looking, a lot of them, well, all of the ones that we're in touch with, which is quite a few at this point, they're actively looking for land, and for a variety of reasons. And so we help the land seekers by essentially onboarding them to our network. And so it means that they sign up, right? And based on that, in sometimes, just based on the sign-up form that we have, we can already say, oh, look, this opportunity over here looks quite promising. Let's look into it. There's something that might be a match. And I think the key word there is might.
Yeah, because could be so diverse, like the predictability there. Of course, it's a few months in, but it's going to be, like...
But then the next step is that they essentially fill out what we call a mini holistic context, right? We try to condense the most key questions to answer to make sure that we can actually match people in a relatively reliable way, and we're still hand-holding part of that process, right?
It's interesting how the holistic context starts to pop up everywhere, from writing contracts on investment to these kind of things to, for sure, relationships. Like, it's very interesting.
Definitely. Well, it does make sense, because it's not only your vision, right? It's also like, what's your actual situation? Or do you already have money at hand to invest in something? Are you going to have to fundraise? You might have to look for a landholder who has the finances to invest in your enterprise, or you need to find someone to help you with raising that money from a bank, whatever it is, right? There's so many different factors, and I think that's part of it right now, is that each land seeker is in a different situation. There are a lot of similarities, let's be honest.
That's interesting as well.
But a little bit in a different situation, depending on what's the financial background, the social background, what's the skill set, where are they in the journey. There's like two major categories, really, if you will, of land seekers that we're seeing. There's the relatively young person. Sometimes they've had a previous life in corporate life or whatever, and sometimes not. But they've done some farm. They are regenerative first, if you will, right? And they're a little bit just looking for a lifestyle, but also looking to build assets for themselves, right? And they can't find land because it's too expensive, or for whatever other reason. So that's like but they don't have as much experience hands-on, right? They might have a few years. They might have done a farm tour like I did, maybe 2 times that, or something like that. And so a lot of them will need some mentoring on the practical side. So we're essentially starting to assemble mentoring teams, and we're lucky enough to have a really big network, of course. Well, not of course, but we do have a really big network of some of the really high qualified, both consultants and mentors, and from each topic really that you'd imagine you would need. So you could say they're needing some mentoring usually on the practical side of things. Whereas you've got the other side of the coin, where it's kind of farmers first, if you will, that they're probably, well, they're usually a bit later in their career as well. They've done farming, they've done maybe conventional farming, or organic farming, and they are maybe 40, 45, sometimes a bit younger. But they would need to unlearn instead of, so they've got a little bit of, it varies how much they would need to unlearn, but often there's a bit of unlearning to do. And so the mentorship around that is like, let's match them up with, let's say, Roots to Regeneration or whatever, or the mentorship function that they could gain help with, right? So it's like, depending on, and I'm obviously, I'm making averages here, right? The 2 major categories, there's a lot of in-betweens and segments and so on that we can talk about, but essentially those are the 2 big segments that we're seeing. And I think it's quite interesting to see that both of them, with a relatively, quote unquote, small amount of mentoring, can actually get really far.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then from a business model perspective, it's a landholder that pays for the surface,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
As of now, yeah. And the idea is that we would have secondary revenue streams, really. So we want to make it cheaper and cheaper for the landholders, really, over time, and to the point where we have a free version, really, and everything we do is shared open source, really. As you might remember
Which was a big topic
big
last
topic
time.
in our last. So I've managed to brainwash Harry into that. No, but he was quite open to it. I think it just makes overall sense, but also just makes strategic sense for us. If we want to build a momentum, if we want to provide value for our users and customers up front, there's no need to hide things.
No.
And we can't do everything. And by doing things open source, we're actually inviting collaborators on board. Actually, that exact approach has meant that even some organization who otherwise might see us as
Editors
we are collaborating with them already. We have an example of Southwest Land Matching in the UK, in England. We're collaborating with them. We're sharing the different adverts from each other and we're helping each other. And there's no problem in that. And I really like that. I think that's showing potentially a new approach, and we'd love to champion that. I think that's just really needed.
And like, what's the ratio? Like how, of course, it's a few months in, but how tricky has the matchmaking been? Like, what kind of connections have already happened? Has it been faster, slower than you expected? Because it is could be a bit of a needle in a haystack. Like, also geography. Like, it's not you're going to say to someone who's in, I don't know, southern Greece, say, okay, please move to Devon to start this dairy thing. Like, there is.
Yeah, I mean, we have been focusing on the UK predominantly. And so the geographical question is not too big. There's been some situations where people ended up not being relevant because the landowner couldn't really sponsor a visa and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But in general, I would say the matchmaking process has gone super well, beyond our wildest expectations in terms of just especially from the landholder's perspective. Okay, we're getting so many really high qualified talents, right? And I think one important thing, the core reason why we're called Abunda, it's abundance, right? So we really want to cultivate that
abundance of talent,
yeah, but not only abundance from the landholder side, but abundance from the land seeker side. They have a lot of options as well. They don't just have to choose whatever is available. There's going to
pick the worst, but because
there's a lot of options for them
too.
The
power dynamic quickly can be quite, and has been, of course, in history of who owns the land and who farms it hasn't been an amazing relationship in many cases. Yeah. So how do you do that in a way that makes sense? It's by giving people options as well. And I think there are other places you can go to or other avenues, so you create a bit more equal footing, which is not easy.
It's probably not that easy, but so far it's going well. And I think it's just as much one thing is the actually being opportunities, which is great. But the other thing is it's also just a mindset. How desperate are you feeling as a human, right? I really want to find the perfect dairy partner for my farm. Okay, fine, right? If you're very desperate, it's not going to work out that well for you, because whether we like it or not, human beings are human beings, and unless you are super emotionally mature and very self-developed, if you will, subconsciously you're going to pick up on that desperation, and you're just going to
not take it.
You're not going to take it, and you're gonna be, let's say, not to your best behavior, really, without even realizing it. It's really funny like that, and something I've really learned from working with an occupational therapist. The psychology behind that is really interesting, I think. But so it's a mindset as well of just every time we run the process. One thing is we level our expectations with the landholder and say, we're going to say to the land seekers, if this doesn't work out for you, there are other opportunities. You don't have to be desperate. You don't have to worry about it, because there are, and they are growing, right? So that's one thing. And they are perfectly fine with that, because they're saying, I only need, at the end of the day, 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, and I need...
In some cases, 6, but mostly it's 1 or 2 people you need.
And I need the best ones in this context, which might take a few rounds to find that. And then long-term wise, because what's often an issue, or seems to be an issue, people stay around for a season or 2, and then are continue in the exploration to look for their own land and maybe scrape by a bit of money to buy a hectare or two somewhere. Like, how do you ensure longevity of these kind of partnerships?
Well, a lot of it is, as far as we can see, it comes down to mainly two things. It's like I said, the relationship and the leveling of expectations between those two parties, if you will. And then it's just, of course, if the business doesn't work out, it's going to have to stop at some point, right? So there's that side of things. So those are essentially the main two things that we support with in the matchmaking process. It's the relationship side, and it's the farm plan / economics of the farm, and say, okay, we have some templates. You are very welcome to use them. In some cases, the landholder wants to make it mandatory really in the process because it allows to understand where people come from and so on. But essentially, they are, quote unquote, just templates, and they're freely available. So anyone could use them really. And we at least try to make them, well, Harry likes to say that I make sexy spreadsheets. I don't know if that's the best explanation of it, but at least we try to make them understandable. We try to make them easy enough to work with, even if you're not with, let's say, a financial background. You can ask questions your way and use kind of a step-by-step logic to arrive at, okay, so what is my annual P&L estimate, really? What's it going to look like in a steady state? What does that look like? What's my idea for this enterprise? And not having to just drag it out of your elbow or another body part. It helps so far that they have something to start with.
And is like long-term land ownership or access to that at all on the table for any of these?
In some cases, yeah. It depends. In some cases, you have, let's say, a contract farming agreement, which is one of the types, obviously. Well, I don't know if that's obvious for all the listeners. You have different types of agreements.
Yeah, because then at the end, you need to get something on paper. Like, okay, you find a match. You wrote your holistic plan.
Yes.
All of you, and it matches.
And you agree on the heads of terms, on the over, and then, okay, then you need to make a legal agreement, right?
Because, yeah.
And the structure is typically, it's a type of share farming agreement, or it's a contract farming agreement, right? Where there's profit share, and otherwise it can be a tenancy, right? And the sort of fourth case, if you will, there's an actual joint venture where you are literally setting up a limited company together, right? And usually you would test out the relationship for that, right? That's what we encourage at least. So maybe you start as a quote unquote normal employee for a year or two to see, can we work together really on a long term? Will this work, right? In some cases, you haven't necessarily sold everything up front, and you might want to see, does it sell, right? So that's part of it, of course. And and then of course you've got your more short-term things once in a while that pop up, which are sometimes a way into a longer-term agreement, like a grass keep, like renting your access to grassland, use it for a cattle or however, or any of those kind of things that may lead into a longer-term relationship. So
the land next door here where we're looking at.
Yeah, we'll see what kind of agreement we end up with. I could see it being mostly a tenancy just to keep it simple, but we'll see what works out. Maybe he wants to do a joint venture. He's a cool guy. I wouldn't expect that kind of attitude, really. Maybe I'm being judgmental of people from the southwest of Zealand in Denmark, where I'm actually born and raised here. But he was quite the neighbor where everyone else around are like quite conventional, let's just say it like that. The first thing he said, oh, you did this farm tour. Okay, I really want to do agroforestry. It's like, okay.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Do you? Nice. I love that. So that's a nice neighbor to have. So that's the cake I'm serving later to lobby for the land.
For the lobby for the land. No, the chickens need they need more space. If this becomes, and then you're looking for your own land seeker basically.
I'm going to have to do that. So the Abunda taking off now, then I'm lucky. Let's just say I'm lucky to have someone I really trust very close, which is my parents, and they are helping me whenever I'm really busy, and they're essentially part of this project, right? So.
But of course not signing up for 600.
They're not signing up for 600 at this point. I'm trying to tease them into it, but I know what their stance is, and it's very clear. We're not going to do 600 chicken, Fred.
No.
You can do that by yourself. Okay, that's fine.
Or budget it properly so you can hire someone. Yeah. Or find a joint venture. Yeah. But I think it's such and what makes Because it seems like an open door in that sense. Of course, you want more people on the land in joint venture and entrepreneurial roles, and whatever kind of structure you can come up with or make sense at the end legally and financially. Why now? What's the piece that it seems to be taking off beyond your wildest expectations? In like why 2025 is and not 2020? Like, there's no magic technology that makes it possible now? Like Tinder was there before. Like, what's the and it's also not like people haven't been looking for land the last years. And what's the inflection point now in terms of those two groups that somehow seem to be both ready for at least a lot of trials?
Yeah. So I think there's one is the annoying answer, which is like it could have been 10 years ago and it would have been just as relevant. But I think there's another element, which is the fact that the concept of, let's say, ecosystem positive or regenerative farming, or however you want to call it, is becoming more widely known, and a lot bigger groups of people are moving in that direction. So there's a certain wave to catch, if you will. And
by
I think
people, you mean the land seekers or land holders or both?
both. There's a lot of different reasons why, beyond the fact that Harry and I have most of our professional network in the UK and so on. There's a lot of different reasons why we could select the UK as a beginning, as a starting point, really. But another is just that there are actually quite a few landholders there that are looking at the public subsidies and grant schemes and are thinking, okay, I'm going to have to make money now, right? So that's one big factor. And also just the maturity, or let's say, or observable, if you will, adoption of regenerative farming practices and ideas and visions. It appears to be a bit larger.
And you have templates, or you have people to like point at, like, okay, what would a chicken operation look like for somebody to have a normal salary?
Yes.
Is it 600, 6,000? What's the,
Yeah.
maybe no, but people don't know the exact number. Who to call to ask, like, okay, give me a rough model here, and you probably have that model.
Yeah.
Probably the same on pigs and the same on dairy and the same on grain to a certain extent. Like, okay, what do you need to...
Yeah, there are people out there who found a lot of really good answers, not perfect answers for every context situation, but a really good place to start from. You want dual purpose? Okay, fine. We call Plantain or Claire Annie. You want to make a regenerative beef enterprise? Okay, call Silas or whoever. There's quite a few different people that are just very well positioned to actually help people. And it's so beneficial. And I find that I'm biased because I have a lot of my network there, but I find that there's a big concentration of that in the UK. And so it makes a good starting point from a sort of whole product or whole service perspective. The ecosystem is there.
You need that concentration, like in a matchmaking enterprise.
That's it. So,
like a marketplace, you need both sides and enough volume to make sense, which doesn't mean you cannot take things in Greece or in Spain, etc. But just the chance you find someone, it's just the chance you find a landholder, probably not. That's easy relatively because they reach out and say, I'm looking for someone. But the chance you can present them with 5 amazing candidates is just more difficult.
I'm quite bullish on that, just to use a very sort of financial term. I'm quite optimistic based on our current results, to be honest. I hear what you're saying. Yes, of course, it's easier in places where you've already built a network of land seekers. Yes,
but then again, you have technology and LinkedIn, and like if you have a big enough database and you know how to use Instagram, and that maybe is an answer to why now, because maybe 5 years ago there weren't enough people looking in those channels to say, okay, I'm looking for places, and I have a few years under my belt, and I'm looking for a longer term thing, and maybe with a house, and I don't want to live in a yurt forever, or in a camper van, and we all know those stories, and that's maybe a maturity of a sector to fill. And maybe also there's an underlying that I think hold back, but now it's the online dating industry as well. Like now it has to be perfect in a bar and this, and like it only, and they found as well, like it can be not standardized, but there is a lot. Like it's not impossible to find like the needle in the haystack. Like there are puzzle pieces you can find, you can select on that, and then it might not work out for 20 years, but maybe 10 on the farm. And that's much better than what we have now, because it's still not run at its ecological and financial max.
That's it.
And so if it's for 10 years, great. But it's for 5, like even better, like not better, but like let's get going. It shouldn't be for a year probably, but like there's so many.
That's it. And you
semi-perfect.
And you can build in reward schemes really For the land seekers, according to, yeah, you can, I mean, for most of our agreements, we've built in, let's say, ecologic measurements as a key performance indicator,
cool,
right?
yeah.
And you could say, okay, you can discuss which one to choose and all these different things, but the fact that they're on the table and they're part of the conversation in an exit situation, let's say 10 years or even 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, what does the land look like? How can I compensate you for that? Is that in terms of herd equity? Is there another type of machinery you want to? There's some mechanism that you can build into it.
If it's not forever, like you become the adopted son and then you take over everything. Like you build up an asset, you helped, you build up assets on your side, and it is relatively mobile, which also probably enables or is a safeguard against some of the toxic relationships because you have other options to move somewhere else.
Yeah, you're not locked in necessarily. You're not locked in. You can move if it's the case.
And the landholder can find somebody else. Like it's not a disaster that never will.
No.
Oh,
sorry.
Did you touch it? Yeah.
Fuck. It was just.
Is it still working? It's still working? No, okay. No. I saw your hand going up and like.
Because I felt like it was dropping from the magnet here. Oh, there you go. It's much better now. Yeah. All good.
I can still see it. So that's an interesting.
It's the overall. What you're saying makes me think of one answer, which is abundance, and this is why we chose the name again, because it is really okay. If this doesn't work out, both parties will be fine.
We'll have other options.
We'll have other options, and they'll be fine. And there are mechanisms and dynamics and agreements put in place to make sure that no matter what happens, really, people are going to be fine.
And it's an interesting thing as well, almost like as I'm looking at the land, like it's also fine if somebody hasn't grown up on that farm and spent 30 years walking it and knows every crook. Now, of course, it might be better, but again, we're in such a degraded state, like almost anything is better than we currently have in terms of production, in terms of complexity, in terms of. And so, you're not going to find someone that knows every single angle and knows from the top of his or her head the production and the yield from every field from the last 30, 40 years. Yeah, that would have been your children that didn't want to take over. Or like there's I think, also trauma there and pieces that we shouldn't underestimate in countryside. Like who wants to take over things?
Yeah,
might not be your direct bloodline. It might be someone else. And that could be like Gabe Brown always, maybe he's going to do it at Groundswell. This probably will be out after that, but he always likes to ask, okay, in especially conventional, sorry, he might not going to do it, but in conventional rooms, okay, who here has somebody to take over? Yeah. And one or two hands usually go up or something. And in regen, it's significantly more, but might not be exactly your children. And that's okay. Like we need people on the land. Like whatever way we can get more hands and eyes on the land, and this sounds like one of them.
I sure hope so. Otherwise, I'm spending my time wisely. But I hear you. And that's one of the bigger things, right? That you said, why now? And I think that's part of the issue. It's an obvious thing that you have a very, let's say, unequal distribution of land ownership. You have a very aging farmer population. We've heard that so many times, and it's just true. And they're not becoming younger. And so
every year we talk about it, they're becoming 1 year older. Yeah.
That's it.
What are we doing about it?
Yeah, exactly.
How do we get more people on the land?
That's it. Actually, that was one of the first talks I had when I met the people of New Foundation Farms. Was okay, but fine. I think your ideas and everything sounds amazing. There's a few things to talk about and all these different things. But how are you going to get enough people involved? And they're like, we have thought about that, which of course they did. But it's just, that was the first conversation really I had with Mark Druell was, okay, how are we going to get enough people into regen really? And we might have found part of that picture, but it's not like we're standing on stages and inspiring people to get into
that because for many it isn't. Like it's a very particular job or a collection of jobs which can be amazing, and I think we're going to see way more people wanting to do that, but they require hand-holding and not feeling alone as well. And I think for many farmers in general and regen farmers almost specifically, because they're so isolated in many cases, they're not isolated, but they're surrounded by, as Matteo likes to call it, also social monoculture around them. If you have a few people, because many countries, I don't know the countryside here, but other places, many people have left. The people that remain not necessarily are the most like progressive because it's a sort of self-selection.
I understand.
Except if you go on a regen route, in a sense, because you really want to push, but it immediately puts you in a whole different group,
Yeah.
or actually alone, meaning you'd be looked weird, like we talked about last time as well, weirdly in the pub.
Yeah.
Your children won't be selected for soccer practice. Real stories I've heard. Like there is a lot of socials. Your fields don't look so neat. We heard it from the earlier organic pioneers. And so have a few people around you, either living on the farm or nearby, that you can share the daily things with. Is a very.
Yeah.
I heard it on another podcast somewhere. Somebody said, deep pioneer in the US, like what would really change his life is to have 4 or 5 other people around them, not next door. Next door would be amazing, but 4 or 5 other farmers that are, or land holders or seekers that are in transition, and that they can discuss these kind of ecosystems with, and mentality and holistic context, and how do we make stuff grow instead of kill it, and like because if you have nobody around you, then you're only going to find it on YouTube, and it's pretty one-dimensional.
Totally, and I think just somewhat a part of that has been emerging with some of these online communities. Like Climate Farmers is one of them, right? And I think they're doing well in
great
many
WhatsApp
cases.
groups in general as well, etc. So there is that.
But that doesn't replace the physical presence of someone you meet at the pub regularly, or someone
you have coffee with in the morning, and then you're going to do your different pieces, and you have regular contact because you're moving the chickens and he or she is moving the cows, or you're doing the market garden. And apart from the fact that you would like to have some more people growing food on your land or around your land, because that just creates more life and better food for you.
That's it.
And so very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing so early on, both in the chicken side of things, 19 chickens, let's see, in a year or so, or maybe not, maybe in your holistic context, it doesn't fit and it stays there. And that's also fine. Like it's not that it has to, but of course with Abunda, how many, do you have a goal for like this year? Of course, it's very like how many relationships you connected, which sounds really, again, like a dating agency. But like, what would you consider success after a year of trial and pilot?
1,000 users.
Users meaning?
Landholders and land seekers.
Okay. In a ratio? Like, do you know
we
it's
haven't
80...
defined our ratio yet, but you're touching on some topics we haven't decided on yet.
Is it 80-20 or 50-50? What are you aiming for? You don't know yet what a successful marketplace looks like.
No, if you judge by the current state of things, it's gonna be more, let's say, 30-70 in favor of land seekers, meaning more land seekers, of course. But equally,
which is really,
because another thing is that you can't really count them one to one.
No, of course.
Because a landholder will often have more than one opportunity for land seeker, right? So how many do you actually need of landholders compared to?
Maybe they come in a group. Yeah.
And we
watch out for the weird sects. Like there's some of these stories.
Come again, the sects?
Yeah, there's some of these stories of these pioneering regen farms, and then they of course were, especially let's say 5 to 10 years ago, I think, open to anybody that would just come, because nobody would in their right mind would go to these places.
Yeah.
And then finding out, not really checking in there. Some people put up a tent and a yurt and a caravan, and suddenly there was like a little extreme commune living there, and they had to kick them off. Like I've heard a number of stories.
I've heard that literally from a client as well. So
there is anyway, of course we're in a different, but it's an interesting, it also attracts some other people, let's say. But you need which is an interesting point to bring up. Like we even imagine how many stacked enterprises, like families or couples or people, can a farm support, like in a piece of land. And I think we don't really know the answer. It's probably higher than we imagine.
I think it's higher than we expect, definitely.
Which doesn't fit in any farming model, because we always went the other route. Okay, less, one tractor, one guy, and a lot of hectares. No, but it's like, I think if you look at like,
and one sprayer.
And then
maybe 2 sprayers.
Like, but it's interesting if you look from like how do we even plan land use? We never imagined it's more, it's always less.
Yeah.
And the models always count for, more efficiency, so less people does. And actually, this is a like, no, actually, we've seen that. I remember an example in Germany of organic farmers that are retiring now, like the original organic ones of 30, 40 years ago. And they supported one family with that farm. Then actually on land, an interesting land story with Thomas Klimt Ripple, that then Kulturland took over. They took the farm, they paid a very nice pension to the farmer. And instead of one family, because they took the land ownership piece out and the rent out, now 5 families can be supported by the land.
Yeah.
Because they have suddenly flexibility, because they don't have the massive rent. Still, the farmer's taken care of. Like the retired farmer has a beautiful house, piece of land, will live fine forever, but didn't get the main huge bonus or the huge land speculation price for the land.
Sure.
And because of that, 5 families instead of 1,
Amazing.
which is such
I
a
love
weird
that.
economic.
Where can you put that in the show notes?
Kulturland. Yeah, I put it in the show notes. It's Thomas Klimt's Rippo, who now actually is transitioning, and we are interviewing him soonish on the training of farmers. Like, it's a very interesting French model where they apprenticeship for regen farmers or agroecology farmers.
Amazing, I love
for
that.
years, and then they help them to match land as well. And I'll send it to you.
I love that. That's like the first time I thought about it. This kind of thing is that kind of project because.
And he's bringing that to Germany now. Exactly how he helped Terre, like the land ownership piece as well.
We should work together with him because I love that. When I was traveling around myself, this is one of the things that I talked to most of the farm owners about was, okay, how many times have you actually had volunteers on your farm? Well, I've had 1 or 2, or sometimes they've had 12. And it's, okay, how many times have you had like some learning objectives? Well, none. Okay, maybe it's time to make some structure around that. Oh yeah, that'll be great, right? So, and I think this is probably what he's doing, right? And it's not to say that
they will be paid even. Like there's like really, okay, how do we train the next generation of farmers? We'll explore it, and we'll put it in the show notes as well, because
sounds awesome.
It's such
I'd love
because
to
we need
talk to
to like start working on the funnel of more capable, multi-year under their belt regen farmers.
Yeah.
That then, because the land piece is going to grow and grow, like the amount of landholders that are going to get in touch, I don't think is going to be the issue beyond the pioneers that already are in their holistic context. Many others will think, oh, but if I can have, instead of the normal tenant that I know is actually destroying my assets, or at least not building it, what if I can have a different relationship? I don't think that's the issue of the supply here, but how many good hands and good minds can you get on the land?
And that's it. And then the landholder essentially can decide what their own role will be, because if they don't want to be super involved, or maybe they don't feel comfortable with all of these different enterprises, there's a potential to get a mentorship team, and you can even get support on managing the fund. There's all kinds of, let's say, add-ons, if you will, that can be selected, but doesn't have to. They're there if you need it, but if you don't, fine. That's
also
great.
Fine.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're more than welcome, and thanks for stopping by on this beautiful day.
How many times have you visited a farm or heard a story of a farmer or landowner that wished they had more people on the farm? Someone to start a market garden, someone to run a chicken operation or an advanced biofertiliser brewery. More stacked enterprises, more diversity, and more hands and eyes on the farm. Of course, only if it makes financial sense, but let's assume that's the case. Where do you find these entrepreneurial people who fit your context, your farm, your country, your culture, and your personality? And when you find them, how do you structure the financial legal side to make a partnership that actually lasts? We probably all agree we need more people, well-paid people on the land. So how do we make that happen? This is a conversation where we walk the land, albeit only 2 hectares, and check in on the latest developments around pasture-based chickens on the land of Fred, and the earliest starts of an agroforestry system, but more importantly, on the new venture of Fred, focused on land matching between people owning the land and people able to work the land, but they don't have access to it, facilitating land partnerships which should last. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. For show notes and links discussed, check out our website, investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/posts. If you like this episode, why not share it with a friend? And get in touch with us on social media, our website, or via the Spotify app, and tell us what you liked most. And give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or your podcast player. That really, really helps us. Thanks again, and see you next time.